What's up, guys? Just doing some car builds here. So I usually start out by pinning the rear axle. The reason I do that is if it gets pinned incorrectly, like if the drill bit wanders or something else happens, it's not happening at the end of the process, which to me, if it happens once the car is built, literally the whole car has to come back apart to get the pins fixed, or actually that whole chassis, I just wouldn't even use it. So I like to do it first. The next thing that I will do is put the guide pins in, especially on these chassis. These are the stiff chassis, so because of the material that's used on these, I have had them break the chassis when the guide pins put in. So I try to do that stuff at the very beginning so that if that does happen, I'm not totally done with the car by the time I realize that something is wrong with it. So right now I'm just making sure that these pins fit good. They're super tight. We use a 20 thousandths. Let's see, where do you have here? 20 thousandths drill bit. Throw the rear axle pins in there. Come on, you can focus. Guess not. But that one's ready. We'll just keep going here. Got these cool poker chips we made on the 3D printer. Kind of a cool little thing, but got 5 of these guys that I'm doing right now. I like to do them in batches. I feel like that's a more efficient way to do it, especially if you're going to get out all of the equipment to do it, which it's not a ton of stuff, but these particular cars are pretty high-end cars. They're restricted open cars, so these are definitely the fastest ready to run car that you can buy from anywhere. They're also pretty expensive, but they have custom arms in them. They're all epoxied, ground, full on race stuff. So this is the first step to these chassis. This one I am going to work this just a little bit more, hopefully make it so that the pin will go in a little bit easier. But I like to use my little pliers here. I don't know if you guys can see those, but I get it started with that. And then once I push it in all the way, I back it off just a smidge so that the axle can pop in there. But this just using the pliers to get it started is just a much better way. So there's that one. We got 3 more. So I'm just gonna kind of take you guys along with me on these, and if this step gets boring, then just skip ahead. But it's a really small drill bit, you know, for the guys that want to do this on their own. It's a very tiny 20 thousandths drill bit. I actually like to leave a decent amount sticking out so that it can flex. I've done enough of these to know that if you have just the right amount sticking out, what'll happen is when you break through the last wall and the pin vise pushes forward, it will actually push the chuck into the chassis, which, because of the angle on the chassis, it'll push the pin vise off center, and almost every single time you'll break your drill bit at that point. So by sticking it out further like I have here, it has saved me a ton of broken drill bits, and I absolutely hate broken drill bits. So I was just in the Viper room a little bit ago grabbing some pins, and I saw that one of the pin vices in there that we use for pinning the everyday orders, one of the drill bits was totally bad on it, so we're gonna have to replace that one. But we like to use a titanium coated drill bit, so you might say that it's unnecessary, but the chassis, especially these ones, are 30% glass filled, so they do have a lot of fiberglass in them, which makes the drill bits wear out pretty dang quick. So I also too, I make sure to oil the back of this pin vise where the head of the pin vise is. It swivels, and the freer that swivels right here, the better. I keep that in the palm of my hand, and then I'm just spinning the pin vise and working it back and forth. But you can actually make these things last pretty long. I probably should make some kind of a fixture for doing these things, but in my experience with that small of a drill bit and the frequency that we do pin chassis, there's just not really a big need for it. But one thing that is cool on this car, and it's something that we have kind of been the innovators of, which is molding the back of the chassis with the dimples in it so that you don't have to guess as to where it goes. Back before the V1, it used to drive me crazy trying to pin some of the other chassis out there on the market. So when we designed this one, since the mold has a slide for the logo in the back, there was absolutely no reason to not put the pinholes in there. And now pretty much every car that has come out after the V1 chassis has that feature in it, which is pretty cool. So makes it so that you don't have to use a special jig or anything like that. All you need is a pin vise, and you can perform that yourself, which is pretty cool. So I've ruined so many of the G3 chassis, and even a lot of the Storm chassis weren't as bad because they had a flat spot there, but still it was tough to get it to go in on the Storm chassis because there was a lot longer area of plastic to go through. On the V1 and on the G3, there is a window right here, which is kind of it allows you to break through into the first wall, and then you go through the second wall. And a lot of guys think that that's for lightning, but it's actually not. So it's actually to allow the chassis to flex right here so that the gear will pass through the magnet bay on the backside and then pop into place. So it's actually like it creates a little spring for this area here. So if you didn't know that, now you know. If you've copied that and you didn't know why it was there, now you know. So it's actually engineered that way for a reason. It has function, and it does make the chassis lighter back there, but I personally don't think that making the chassis lighter in the back, at least in that area, is worth the risk. But for this purpose, so that the gear hub of the gear can pop in and out of there, that's what it's for. So now we got those all pinned up, And we're gonna put our pin vise away. And we need to put our extra pins away. So we pre-cut these pins. We sell them long and then, let guys cut them. You can also use wire. I used to love all of my Slot Tech cars had a really cool little U-shape wire on the back that Tony used to make. So that was a super cool feature that those cars came with. But we just use the pins. I also like the Ghost Cat pins. Roger put some much larger pin heads in there, which it's an aluminum pin. It's a really nice piece, so that's a nice feature. So it's cool to see stuff continuing to get improved. But now we're going to go ahead and install the guide pins. So these are stiff chassis. I like to install it like so, and I only go to the first location on these chassis. So I've seen guys do this many different ways. I've also seen guys bust their knuckles doing this. I've also seen them break chassis, and I'm not really interested in doing any of that, so I do it this way. You just got to make sure that your pliers don't slip off the top side or you'll gouge the chassis right here. So, but guide pins are in, so we have made it past all of the danger zones. The next step is going to be install independent front end. So this is my little cache of independent front end stuff that I keep in my office. We obviously have a ton of that stuff all in bulk down in the Viper room, but because I do custom builds in my office, I like to keep my own little stash of stuff here. So these cars, we're building 5, so we're going to pull out 5 of the Viper hardened chrome front axles. So I don't know if you can see on there, but these are hard chromed, chamfer on both ends. Really nice piece. Next up is our retainers. So these retainers, the way that they're made, they have a chamfer on one side, and I like to put that chamfer to the inside of the rim. We're going to go ahead and just use natural on all of these. I know some people probably think that's boring, but that's what they're getting. So I have made a video on independent front end setup before, but I like to put the retainer in the rim like so, and then I put it face down. Once again, the chamfer on that is facing the axle so that there's a nice lead in, and then I have this set up like this, and I'm just using the end of this screwdriver to press down on the axle, and it will press. Let's see if we can get this baby to focus here. It'll press that flush, which is what we want. So I'll go through, load these guys up, and then I prefer to use a 5 thou spacer on both sides of the front end. So the next thing that we'll do after we get all 5 of these axles on is we'll put one spacer on, put the axle on the chassis or through the chassis, put the other spacer on, and then we'll repeat what we're doing here, but we're going to have to be kind of balancing the whole car and making sure that our spacer doesn't fall off. But done it enough times for it to be kind of natural. But while we're doing it, I'll see if there's any tips or tricks that I can give to you guys. But these are going to be our front axle spacers. Need 10 of them. Okay, so I like to put it on like so. And then these are all going to be short wheelbase. So I'll push it through the chassis, and then I'm going to install the spacer on this side and kind of just set it aside. You want to make sure that that doesn't fall off of there. I'll get another rim and retainer set up here, and now I use this index finger to keep the spacer on as I roll this thing in like so. We'll go ahead and press it down flush and make sure that it has enough play. So I usually set these things up to where they probably have like 5 to 7 thousandths play. That's typically how you would set that up for a routed track. If you're running on a sectional like an AFX track or Tyco, something that has a lot of joints, you can definitely run this looser and the car will actually be faster because it's not going to be tracking as much. The wheels will be tracking and the car will be staying straight. So there's one. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process kind of at full speed now. But this little hammer that I use, I'm really just using the back of it. I don't hardly ever use the front of it, but it does have a bunch of holes and dimples on the end there, and sometimes if it's positioned correctly, it'll push the axle through the retainer, which it did in that case. So I'm going to go ahead and use my puller to just back that off so that I have the right amount of play there. But as you can see, both of these guys are done and ready for electrical. So sometimes I do electrical after the guide pin. Other times I put the front ends on just because it's a little bit longer process and there's not really any risk when you are installing the electrical, but I will do that here after we get this part done. So we're gonna go ahead and press that third one on. Looks good, I think. Just gotta make sure that I didn't forget a spacer. Actually looks like I might have on this one. So we're gonna pull that back off. And that is why I like to have piles of counted out proper quantities of parts in front of me, so that if I do end up with extra parts or anything like that, I can go back and find them. But that one is kind of a total fail right there. So like I said, this hammer has a lot of holes in the backside, and sometimes you can end up with the axle going right in the hole. But looks like we might have lost a spacer too in that little fiasco that we just had. So now we are getting down to where we don't have enough parts out. Okay, looks good. Okay, so because we did lose one spacer, which it could be on my lap, but I usually okay. So that kind of stuff happens. You just gotta watch it. Now, if I was doing this and I had the magnets in the cars and I lost a spacer, I would definitely be trying to find that spacer, because more than likely it would be in a magnet somewhere. I'm going to go ahead and use the face of brass so that it doesn't go into that hole again. Usually I just sand this thing down, but I don't have time to do that right now. So we're almost through all 5 of these. But hopefully the repetition here, and also, you know, seeing that there still can be silly things that can happen even to someone that has done thousands of cars. But if that happens, you just kind of roll with it. So now we got all of our chassis ready to get electrical. I'm gonna just make sure that my spacer isn't out here. We're gonna put our front end setup away, back in my toolbox, and we're gonna get out our electrical system. So we're gonna use gold standard shoes on these cars. Just count them out real quick. Okay, we got 5 pair out there. I keep them in parts tubes. Wrote an S on this one for standard. And then we're also gonna use gold hangers. Looks like we're a little bit short, so I'll have to go down to the parts room, pull some of those. But these cars also are gonna get some heavier springs than what we normally run. And these guys, if they're tangled up, I almost don't even bother trying to untangle them by hand. I use the tweezers, but they almost always are gonna be kind of tangled up. These ones are pretty tangled, but we're getting it, we're getting it. So since I only have 3 sets of hangers right now, I'm only gonna pull 3 sets of springs, just so that I don't bump them or anything like that. So, okay, so to pop the hangers in, you wanna start setting them there, and then I am going to push this top corner at a 45-degree angle to just pop it down in there. You want to try to do this in a way that doesn't stretch, bend, or disrupt the hanger at all. The next thing that I'll do is drop the springs in, and next or last will be the pickup shoe. So this one's critical. You can see how I have that laying there. You just want to put pressure on the backside where the hook is and drop it under there. You do not want to stretch this shoe. You don't want to disrupt anything about the shape. This is a problem that even people that, you know, they'll say, well, I'm a national champion, I know how to put shoes on. Well, that's great. It doesn't mean that you know how to do it right. Usually what they do is they put them on, they bend them, and then they spend 10 minutes trying to get them as flat as possible, and one's, you know, extended further off the car than the other one, and it's just like, what are you doing? Just stop doing that. Put them on like this, they stay on, they go on flat, and these shoes will not come back off this car until they're basically trash. And when they're trash, they come off. Who cares if you bend them? And they get thrown in the trash. So the key here is not bending, tweaking, or tampering with any of the electrical components. All of that stuff is designed in a way to be absolutely perfect when you install it. These cars, because they are pretty strong magnets and I set them up, they get set up fairly high. That's why we went with the standard pickup shoes. They'll be dead flat with a 340 to a 355 front tire. So there's those three. Got two more to throw electrical in, but I think for this video's sake, we'll just call this part 1, and I'll probably stop this one here. Be sure to check out part 2, which is going to be getting the motor setups ready, magnets, bushing, all of that stuff, and then popping the motors in these bad boys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know.